Now, Jacob Rees Mogg has become perhaps the unlikeliest star of the current Parliament, the darling of Conservative Party conference, the subject of an online fan movement known as Mogmentum, and currently bookies' favourite to succeed Theresa May as next leader of the party. Now, if you're one of those who feels they're just not hearing enough from the MP for North East Somerset, then I have good news. He's agreed to take part in a fortnightly podcast for the website Conservative Home, called, perhaps inevitably, the Moggcast. Let's have a listen to him discussing one of the biggest domestic challenges facing the government.
The other obvious area is the health service, which is clearly under strain during the winter flu outbreak. But in reality, austerity in the NHS for 7 years of 1% real increases is against what has happened in its previous history, and it's going to be very hard to continue with, however much there are limited resources.
Well, that was Jacob Rees Mogg, or the voice of, and Paul Goodman from the website Conservative Home joins us now. So is this Moggcast just Jacob Rees Mogg speaking? I mean, is there any debate? Is there any, what actually happens?
Oh, I do talk to him.
You do?
A conversation.
It is a conversation.
Him and I, or Mark Wallace and I, Mark is my other co-worker on Conservative Home. We did think of offering him a column. We have to cover the whole Tory landscape, and he's one of the most arresting and distinctive figures on that landscape. And of course, we could have done that. Anna's other colleague, Nicky Morgan, has a column, and we could have offered one to him. But I thought, no, what he's best known for, that he writes perfectly well, is his speaking. So I'll sit down with him once a fortnight and discuss the NHS. He wants a bit more money for it. Housing, he's all in favour of more building on the green belt, if necessary, which might surprise. And Brexit, where, more predictably, he thinks the House of Lords shouldn't hold up the withdrawal bill. Right.
What's the most revealing thing he's said so far to you?
The most revealing thing so far, and it did come as a slight surprise to the audience, and I think it's being picked up a bit, is that he said it's going to be very hard to sustain NHS spending at this level rather than increase it, given the pressures on the service. And that will surprise some, because he's seen as a figure who's very much on the right of the party, but he dropped a broad hint about that, so we've gone with that as the main lead.
Have we reached peak Mogg, in your mind?
I've no idea.
Well, what do you think? I mean, are you pleased to be hearing more of him on podcast, or not?
He doesn't represent Conservative members in my constituency, or indeed Conservative voters.
Right.
He has obviously he's an important player. He's a delightful man, but I don't think that I would like people to think that Jacob represents the modern day Conservative Party.
So why is he so popular with so many members?
I don't know where the evidence is for that.
Is he popular with Conservative members?
According to our survey, yes, we have a 1,300 monthly panel. I think it's pretty solid. So, for example, 70% of them last month lined up behind the Prime Minister's EU deal that she signed at Christmas. So, it's not a bunch of raging Brexiteers.
Anybody can. But your website, quite rightly, is open to everybody. And if you look at the comments on it, there are a large number of people who are not members of the Conservative Party who put comments on it. So to do polls based on...
That's the classic mistake, if I may say so.
Do please enlighten me.
I will. Of mistaking about 30 people who comment for the thousands of people who read it each day.
But they're not necessarily members of the Conservative Party.
No, not necessarily at all.
It's really
but my argument on the poll really is this. Look at the results. If it was UKIPers or very hardline Brexiteers, you'd have 70% of those who respond coming out against the Prime Minister's deal. Whereas, in fact, 70% of them, 7 in 10, I'm sure it's the same sort of view in your association, you'll tell me, were lined up behind the Prime Minister's deal.
And he was the darling of the party conference. I mean, he was sort of mobbed.
What's the basis on which you say that? Because a lot of people went to a fringe meeting.
Yeah, and they were packed with support. Weren't they Conservative Party members?
But most Conservative Party members do not go to Conservative Party conference because in my association, most of them are actually at work.
Well, Graham Brady, the man who would obviously oversee a Conservative leadership contest, has said he doesn't think Mr Rees Mogg is a viable candidate for Prime Minister. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think Jacob said that himself, hasn't he? He said, you can't come straight from the back benches to be Prime Minister. And I think he's right. I find it quite hard to imagine Jacob as Prime Minister, though you never know. But I think Anna's right in one sense. Look, if we had the website 7 days a week, and all we had was Jacob Rees Mogg, this would be most unrepresentative of what members think. You've got to have a mix. That's why we have You know, for example, Nicky Morgan, I think, works quite closely with Anna. That's why we have Garvin Walsh, who's a big critic of Brexit.
But has he been given too much of a platform, do you think, for views?
Because you guys love it, because it gives you a story, which I don't criticise. That's your job. I know to be a journalist, so I understand these things. But he does not represent the majority of Conservative voters, for sure. His views on abortion, for example, are deeply upsetting and troubling to many of us. Both women, Conservative women and Conservative men. And they don't represent Conservative voters or Conservative members.
Right,
and that's very important to
remember. Do you accept that? Has he been given too much of a platform? Yes or no?
It depends what you're trying to do. If you're a website trying to get readers, of course you'll have it, or you'll have Nicky Morgan to get up your ratings.
And on that note, we have to end the show. And
They thought we'd just roll over and have our tummies tickled, and they've suddenly discovered that the British bulldog doesn't behave like that.